Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is what everyone is talking about, and we'll probably be talking about this small Texas town for a very long time. This town has become synonymous with senseless tragedy. Yes, Uvalde is what people are talking about. Since the massacre of 19 children and 2 teachers in Uvalde, Texas, it has been the topic of nearly every single conversation in my world. And not just in my world. Before Tuesday, by the way, May 24th, 2022, almost no one outside the area had even heard of Uvalde or Uvalde County, unless you were tracking illegal immigrants entering the United States from Mexico. Now this very small town of 15,000 people, located 40 miles from San Antonio and 30 miles from the Rio Grande, the Mexican border, trips easily off everyone's tongue. It's a household name. This school and many other schools in the districts experience real lockdowns at least once a week. Uvalde is on the path for illegal immigrants, and the lockdown is initiated when a dangerous suspect is thought to be on the move near their school. Most discussions about this issue revolve around the issue of gun control, or about finding out what happened, or about what and when and why everything went wrong. In my world, though, another question looms very large. Sometimes the question is raised front and center, and sometimes it lurks in the background, the unspoken, proverbial elephant in the room. The question is, how safe are our Jewish agencies and organizations? Our shuls, our synagogues, temples, our day schools, our Hebrew schools? How safe are we? As of this writing, Robb Elementary seems to have been the unlucky straw picked by an 18-year-old on a murder spree. I'm leaving his name unsaid. I don't like to promote the names of these murderers. Repeat, I don't like to promote the names of these murderers. For many of them, the hope is that their horrific act will bring them fame and notoriety. I will not facilitate that hope. Theirs are not the names to be remembered. It's the names and lives and stories of the victims that deserve to be remembered. Unlike secular schools across America that are targets of deranged mass murderers, like in Sandy Hook and in Uvalde, threats against identifiable Jewish locales are obviously soft targets. The reasons are clear to everyone. Jews are targets of violent hatred. The reasons for such hatred and the ensuing violence, on the other hand, is the subject of endless debate. Debates that cannot be resolved. For one thing, it's very certain. There's one thing for sure. Jews and Israel are not the cause of Jew hatred. Jew hatred exists, palpably exists, even in areas where Jews have never, ever existed. And this hatred begets violence. There's no solution to this hate. We have been trying to find one for centuries. That does not mean that Jews must be targets, that we should allow ourselves to be targets. Instead, we must harden the target, thereby making Jewish targets safer. Jewish communities spend a significant amount of their annual budget on security, on average about 10 to 20%. That is a pretty penny that's not going to education, not going towards fixing leaks or broken air conditioning, not going to outreach or programming or salaries. In the aftermath of COVID, people are finally returning to synagogues and community activities. Before COVID struck, security was a priority in the Jewish world. It was a burden, a responsibility everyone bore and accepted. Since COVID, I've witnessed a lax attitude by individuals. Doors are allowed to remain open. Security details do not maintain the same outside presence. Maybe it's deliberate. Maybe it's weariness. Maybe whatever. It's a problem. I've seen people disabling auto locks on doors during services in synagogues. That's not only foolish, it's downright dangerous. It's an open door, a propped open door, we're being told, at least by authorities, that allowed the invasion of this killer to enter the school in Texas, a propped open door. Schools are easy targets in the United States. School shootings, pull at our heartstrings. School buildings that should be safe, learning environments, are turning into stuff of nightmares. According to Newsweek article, World Population Review records, the new number of shootings in the United States is 288 at schools. Education Week puts the number of school shootings in 2018 from 2018 to 119 of them. According to their records, Uvalde is the 27th school shooting since 2022 started. Schools can learn from the Jewish community. Securing a school takes three things. It takes money, it takes a plan, and it takes educating people to implement the plan. Boards of education, local, state, federal governments need to allocate more money to school safety. Parents need to be involved. School administrators need to drill. Police need to coordinate and practice the real-time active shooter exercises. We cannot shut down our institutions. We cannot work to do that. We must work harder and better to protect them. Shutting down goes against the very essence of who we are and that those institutions mean to us. The word school actually comes from the Greek, skole. It originally meant leisure, or a place where one came for leisurely activities, like a lecture. In Latin, schola is similar but more specific, a place of instruction. From the Latin, the word goes to almost every European language. The Yiddish word is shul. It comes from the German. The shul was a place like a Beit Midrash, a house of learning. A synagogue is from the Greek. It's a direct translation of the Hebrew Beit HaKnesset, the house of assembly. Our lives, our culture, compel us to gather and learn. We need to do our best so that we may gather and learn in safety. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from the JTA. It was written by Lior Zaltzman, and it was published on May 27th, 2022. The column is entitled, "I Left Israel to Give My Kids the American Dream. Is this it?" The thesis is obvious. Israel is dangerous, but not like the United States. This is how one mother is dealing with her new reality. This is how Zaltzman begins. "On the day when the shooting happens, I finally unlock what some say is the most vital part of the American dream. My husband and I have a house in the suburbs now. Big trees towering above, no picket fence, but a wide expanse of green and room for the pattering of tiny feet. As we sign the paperwork, we each take turns rocking our baby on our legs. This house is for our children." We say it over and over again. If it were just he and I, we would be content with the walls of a small Brooklyn apartment, with city streets as a backyard. Instead, we chose to give them rooms to grow into, shingle roof, manicured lawns, and a garden to plant and grow together. Like so many of the families in Uvalde, Texas, I am an immigrant. I came here to this country with a dream to give myself and my children a better future. As we drive home, our baby sleeping in the back seat, we hear the news of 21 dreams extinguished by an AR-15. Zaltzman continues the parallel. She too got her first gun at the age of 18. Her gun was given to her by the Israeli army, by the IDF. Lior Zaltzman writes, "Just like the shooter at Robb Elementary School, I got my first rifle at 18. It was borrowed, not bought. And a few weeks later, I returned it, along with magazines full of bullets, to an army warehouse. It scraped against the fabric of my coarse olive green uniform, pushed against my core as I slept with it in an army-issued mattress. As I shot it at a dusty military range, I couldn't help think, but I am too young and too stupid for this. When I was young, not much older than my oldest son is now, I was promised that maybe I wouldn't have to go to the army when I grow up. When I moved away from Israel to the United States, I found comfort in the fact that this was one false promise I wouldn't have to make to my children. But instead, I find myself with much more harrowing false promise to make. Each day I send them to school, I'll have to tell them that they're safe when I know that they're not." Now comes further explanation of tensions and fears Lior Zaltzman wrestles with on a daily basis. She concludes by giving insight in the differences between the United States and living in Israel. About Israel, she writes, "Yes, in Israel we send children to defend our country in uniforms and guns, but at least they know they'll be in danger." She's right. They know why they're targets in Israel. Zaltzman continues with her conclusion by writing, "Every day, the children of this country get drafted to be part of a war, one that they didn't sign up for, a cynical war waged by politicians and gun lobbies. Almost every mass shooting involves an AR-15, and yet we refuse to outlaw them. So many shootings are committed by young, angry men, and yet we don't restrict their access to guns. Too many men and women in power send us the message that guns are important than the lives of our children and of their teachers, who are meant to foster their growth and not shield them with their bodies. I had my children in this country hoping, in part, to protect them from violence. But when I see images of Althea Ramirez and Irma Garcia, all Uvalde victims and their families, another community devastated by the same gun, I recognize that an American dream that, for now, I cannot give them." A powerful and heartfelt thank you to Lior Zaltzman. Her points are well taken. Moving on to another topic of vital importance to us. Next is a column by Ram Ben Ishai that was published in Ynet on May 23rd. The column is entitled, "Iran Senior Military Officials Killing Was Preemptive Intervention." Subtitle, Opinion, "The successful assassination attributed to Mossad of Colonel Hassan Sayyad Kodayar reveals yet again how fragile the Iranian regime is, but Ayatollahs haven't had the last word on this affair just yet." Anything Ram Ben Ishai writes is worth reading, and this piece is no exception. Ben Ishai explains the significance of the Mossad assassination of an Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander. He gives us depth and perspective, not just as to why Mossad did it, but also the role of this particular commander. Here's how Ben Ishai begins. Colonel Hassan Sayyad Kodayar, who was shot dead outside his home in Tehran on Sunday, was one of the senior commanders of Unit 840 of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. He may have also been the commander of a secret Iranian unit charged with planning and carrying out assassinations and attacks internationally, either in retaliation or as a means to preventively remove threats on Tehran and its regime. In recent years, Unit 840 operated under Kodayar's directives mainly to attempt to harm Israelis and Israeli institutions across the world in order to avenge killings of Iranian nuclear scientists and other officials, all attributed to Israel's secret service agency, Mossad. Now Ben Ishai draws the link between this assassination and other Mossad assassinations in Iran. He writes, "The most recent assassination of Professor Mohsen Fakhrizadeh back in November 2020, Fakhrizadeh was the Iranian nuclear physicist and scientist and was regarded as the godfather of Iran's nuclear program. Fakhrizadeh was eliminated before completing the nuclear project, and the frustrated Revolutionary Guard commander swore to avenge his death. However, so far, despite repeated attempts, they have not succeeded. The person who was in charge of avenging his death was Colonel Hassan Sayyad Kodayar. Over the past 2 years, he tried again and again, but failed every time due to the Mossad's effective intelligence gathering capabilities and the cooperation of foreign security services." Ben Ishai now begins his conclusion. He writes that Iran is threatening to seek revenge. He writes that Israel needs to stay alert. This is what he writes. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi on Monday expressed his condolences to Kodayar's family and pointed a blaming finger at the global arrogance, which is a term used to describe the United States and its allies, including Israel. According to Raisi, Those who were defeated in battle by the forces defending the holy places of the Shiite Muslims in Syria expressed their frustration with such assassinations. The president emphasized that Iranian security officials will surely avenge the criminals who are behind the death of the martyr. Thus, it should be assumed that Unit 840 and other elements of the IRGC will do everything in their power to fulfill that threat. But in the meantime, they're trying to deal with the shame and humiliation they suffered as a result of the assassination. It is very likely that Iran's semi-official report on Sunday that members of an Israeli intelligence service network had been exposed and arrested by the IRGC was a desperate attempt to cover up that embarrassment. It was not the first successful assassination conducted by foreign forces on Iranian soil, making it seem like the regime is struggling to thwart them, which in turn may also embolden the opposition elements at home. This column, by the way, is exceptional and puts many things into perspective, well thought through and very well written. Thank you, Ron Ben-Ishai. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 7 cartoons and memes today. The first cartoon is not funny at all. Actually, it's very sad. Cartoons can serve many purposes. The medium is very powerful, and while most times artists poke fun at situations and make us laugh, sometimes artists draw moving and sad scenarios, like this one. The cartoon is entitled Real Thoughts and Prayers. A parent sitting in his car has just dropped off his son at school. He thinks, I hope nothing happens to him today. As the students file in line past the teacher and into the school building, the teacher thinks, I pray I can protect them. This is so true and so sad. Next up is a cartoon which is simply funny. It pokes fun at people who do not hear well. 2 people are speaking. One says, my doctor told me to accessorize and buy nice shoes. The second woman says, I'm pretty sure he said to exercise and eat the right foods. The reality is that we often hear what we want to hear, not necessarily what we are told, and that's certainly the case when we're speaking to our physicians and our medical professionals. This next cartoon is a play on James Bond. Remember James Bond? Anyone familiar with the debonair James Bond, 007, knows that he likes his martinis shaken, not stirred. In this cartoon, Bond is strapped to a table and being tortured by an evil-looking character holding a martini and stirring it. James Bond shouts, no, because it's such torture. This next meme is very funny. Everyone who has done any laundry can relate to it. We see a label on a sweater with 6 symbols on it. We don't really know what the symbols mean. They're like hieroglyphics in a lot of different ways. But under the symbols, there's an instruction which reads, or give it to your mother, she knows how to do it. That is certainly true. This next meme is a sign about passive-aggressive behavior. And we all know people who are passively aggressive. No question about it. The sign reads, the first rule of the passive-aggressive club is, you know what? Never mind. It's fine. That's hilarious. I hear it a lot. This will make you chuckle. There's no doubt about it. An infant on the beach is drinking, actually chugging a can of Coors beer. The caption reads, leave me alone. There's no formula. Of course, because of several issues, the baby formula has been in severe shortage and will be for a significant amount of time to come. And finally, one of the best memes I have seen in a very long time is coming up next. We see a desk accessory of a knight who's bowing down on one knee with a pen held ceremoniously in his hands. The caption reads, my lord, I could not find the sword, but I've heard this is mightier. This obviously is a play on the pen is mightier than the sword, and it's a wonderful, wonderful meme. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Turkey's foreign minister paid a 2-day visit to Israel. It was the first high-level Turkish visit to Israel in 15 years. relations between the two countries have been strained of late. While in Israel, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu met with Israeli leadership as well as Palestinian leadership. Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid spoke at a joint Israeli-Turkish press conference and said, "The goal is to form and expand economic and civil cooperation between our countries and to lead our two countries' comparative advantages regionally and globally, even during the pandemic and even in times of political tension." Lapid and Cavusoglu indicated that they would begin working on a new civil aviation agreement. Turkey's foreign minister emphasized that normalizing ties with Israel will help efforts to find a peaceful solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The foreign ministry of Turkey said that, quote, "working on positive agenda can also help us address our disagreements in a more constructive manner." And then he added that communication between the president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and his Israeli counterpart helped calm tensions between Israel and the Palestinians in Jerusalem during Ramadan, unquote. Lapid agreed and said that the two countries, quote, "have always known how to return to dialogue and cooperation," unquote. It has been reported that President Joe Biden has finalized his decision to keep Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the notorious group, on the U.S. list of terrorist groups. According to senior Western officials, the decision was made by the United States president, will further complicate international efforts to restore the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal. No doubt about that. Iran has maintained that removing the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Corps, from the terror list is essential if progress is to be made on the now stalled talks. Another person familiar with the situation said that President Biden conveyed his decision regarding this issue way back in the end of April in a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. The source added that the decision was conveyed as absolutely final and that the window for Iranian concessions has closed. 13 UN ambassadors came to Israel at the invitation of Gilad Erdan, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. The trip was organized by both Ambassador Erdan and the UJA of New York. The objective of putting together this 7-day trip was for these UN ambassadors to see the real Israel, and then, after seeing Israel with their own eyes, their voting records in the United Nations may turn more favorably towards Israel. Ambassadors toured historic sites and sites of religious significance and cultural significance. They were taken to visits at the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial. They went and met with Israeli senior leadership, including President Isaac Herzog, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid. They visited several IDF bases across the country and engaged in discussions with Israeli security officials. As part of their visit, the 13 ambassadors also visited sites where Gaza terrorists and Hezbollah terrorists have perpetrated attacks against Israel. The emphasis of much of this trip was mutual economic and security interests. The United Nations ambassadors visiting Israel represent Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Estonia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tanzania, Benin, Burundi, Malawi, El Salvador, Panama, and Mexico, who is a current member of the United Nations Security Council. During the visit, Israeli Ambassador Erdan commented, "We are bringing the ambassadors to Israel to experience Israel's commitment to coexistence, freedom, and equality firsthand. The visitors to Israel would," he said, "get a deeper understanding of Israel's reality and contributions to the international community." Tel Aviv University researchers announced that they have identified a previously unknown mechanism shared by mutations in 2 genes, which are thought to cause autism, schizophrenia, and certain other conditions. Researchers also found that an existing experimental drug may be suitable for treating a range of rare syndromes caused by these mutations, which impair brain functions. The new findings could lead to the development of effective treatments for some cases of autism, schizophrenia, and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Some cases of autism are caused by mutations in various genes. said Professor Ilana Gozes from the Department of Human Molecular Genetics and Biochemistry at the Sackler Faculty of Medicine and the Segal School of Neuroscience at Tel Aviv University. Today we know of more than 100 genetic syndromes associated with autism, 10 of which are considered relatively common, though still extremely rare. The results of this study were published in the Molecular Psychiatry Journal. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that there is a reason that we spend such a significant amount of time speaking about Turkey? There's a reason why we do it. But before talking about the country Turkey, let's look at the name and explain why the animal, the bird, is called turkey. Now, we could talk about this on Thanksgiving, but because we're talking about Turkey, the country, so much, it's important to give this the context. With that understanding where the bird's name comes from, we will have an explanation for why, in Hebrew, let's say, for instance, and in many other languages, the bird turkey is actually called Hodu, which means India. The classical name for Turkey, the country, is Turkia, or Turkia. That is its Latin name also. It means the land of the Turks. That must have been the same name and meaning in local languages at the time. In Turkish, as in many other languages, the bird turkey is called Hindi because it came from India. It is a shortened form and it means a bird from India. When Native Americans and pilgrims of North America confronted a large and similar bird, they called it a turkey for the obvious reasons. In proper Hebrew, turkey, the bird, is called Tarnagol Hodu, which means an Indian chicken. That's interesting. In rabbinic correspondence spanning several centuries discussing the turkey, the fowl, the turkey is sometimes referred to as indica, which is Yiddish for from India. And it's also called a Dutch chicken. That's because the Dutch, the West Indies Trading Company, owned the settlements in North America. Turkey and turkeys have almost nothing to do with the country named Turkey. The country is named after a tribe that lived there. The bird is actually from India. In today's political climate, what happens in Turkey has a big impact on the world. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.